Some wounds aren't meant to heal until the truth reveals itself. In the shadows of wealth and success, some treasures remain hidden, buried beneath the weight of pride and the deafening silence of words left unspoken. What if the life you built was missing its foundation? What if everything you thought was true wasn't? And what if redemption was waiting for you, preserved in the pages of a forgotten diary? This is the story of a man who had everything money could buy, but had lost what mattered most, and his journey to discover that it's never too late to become who you might have been. Ethan Brooks stood at the vast window of his penthouse, 40 stories above Boston's glittering skyline. The city lights reflected in his whiskey glass, dancing like the memories he tried so desperately to drown. At 42, he had everything most men dreamed of: founder of breakthrough tech, with a net worth north of $200 million featured in Fortune and Forbes. His face, handsome despite the premature creases around his eyes, had graced magazine covers celebrating innovation and entrepreneurial spirit. But tonight, like most nights for the past decade, Ethan drank alone. He took another sip, feeling the familiar burn. 10 years since the divorce. 10 years since Sophia had walked out of his life without explanation. At least, that's what he'd convinced himself. "Mr. Brooks?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom, shattering the silence. "The real estate agent called. They need the final approval for listing the old house in Brookline." That house. Their house. The one he'd bought when Breakthrough had secured its first major contract. The one he'd been avoiding for a decade, letting it sit empty rather than face the memories it held. "Tell them I'll handle it personally," Ethan replied, his voice hardened by years of commanding boardrooms. "I'll go there tomorrow." He tossed back the remaining whiskey, the amber liquid doing little to numb the bitterness he'd nursed for a decade. Tomorrow, he would finally purge the last physical reminder of Sophia Carter from his life. "You never listen, Ethan. Not once. Have you actually heard what I'm trying to tell you?" Sophia's voice cracked with frustration, her dark eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What's there to hear? You're being irrational." Ethan shot back, not looking up from his laptop. "I'm building an empire for us. Can't you see that?" "For us? There won't be an us if you keep this up." Her voice had dropped to a whisper. He'd scoffed then, believing it was just another of their temporary storms. She'd been trying to tell him something for weeks, but he'd been too consumed with the company's expansion to European markets. 2 days later, she was gone. No note, no explanation, just her wedding ring left on his desk and divorce papers arriving a week later. The betrayal had calcified into something hard and impenetrable inside him. In his mind, she'd abandoned him when his company needed him, most when he was most vulnerable. She'd chosen to walk away rather than weather the storm with him, or at least, that's the story he'd told himself for 10 years. Ethan placed the empty glass down with deliberate control. Tomorrow, he would close this chapter for good. Little did he know, tomorrow would instead rewrite everything he thought he knew. Have you ever realized how easily we create stories in our minds to protect ourselves from pain? The narratives we construct, where we're the heroes, the victims, the ones who were wronged, sometimes shield us from harder truths we're not ready to face. What truth might you be hiding from in your own life? What conversation have you been avoiding? What voice have you been silencing? Perhaps even your own. Remember, the stories we tell ourselves shape our reality, but sometimes those stories need revising. The key felt foreign in Ethan's hand as he unlocked the door to the colonial-style home. Sunlight filtered through dusty windows, illuminating dancing particles suspended in time, much like the memories he'd left frozen here. The real estate agent had offered to handle everything, but something had pulled him here. Perhaps it was closure, or perhaps something deeper he couldn't name. Their furniture remained, draped in white sheets like ghosts of a life abandoned. His footsteps echoed across hardwood floors as he moved through the house, mentally cataloging what should be sold, donated, or discarded. In the study, once his favorite room, books still lined the built-in shelves. Sophia had been the reader between them, filling their home with literature he'd never made time for. He ran his fingers across the spines, a fine layer of dust transferring to his skin. A loose panel at the back of the bookcase caught his attention. Had it always been there? He pressed against it, feeling it give way to reveal a small hidden compartment. Inside was a leather-bound journal, emerald green with gold leaf edges, Sophia's diary. His first instinct was to leave it untouched. Privacy had always been something he respected, even if their marriage had ended badly. But as he moved to return it, a loose page slipped out, bearing his name in her elegant handwriting. "Ethan, if you're reading this." His heart hammered against his ribs as he carefully opened the journal, telling himself it was abandoned property now, justifying the invasion. The first entry was dated shortly after they'd moved in together. "Ethan worked. Late again tonight. I know the company needs him, but sometimes I wonder if he sees how much I need him too. Still, when he talks about his dreams, I can't help but believe in them as much as he does. His passion is why I fell in love with him. I just wish I had more of his attention. Tomorrow I'll try again to tell him my news." He flipped forward, each entry revealing a Sophia he'd never truly known, or perhaps had never truly seen. Third attempt to tell Ethan about the pregnancy today. Got as far as "I need to tell you something important" before his phone rang. Another investor. "I understand, but this baby won't wait forever." Pregnancy? Ethan's hands began to tremble. "Doctor says everything looks healthy." I heard the heartbeat. Today. Wished so badly that Ethan was there to hear it too. Tried to tell him tonight over dinner, but he was distracted by the Richardson contract. I left the sonogram on his desk with a note. Found it untouched this morning beneath a stack of reports. Ice formed in Ethan's veins as the entries continued, each one revealing a woman desperately trying to share her joy with a husband, too busy building an empire to notice the treasure right before him. 7 months now. The baby kicks whenever. I play Mozart. I've started talking about his father, about what a brilliant man he is, how dedicated. I want our child to understand that Ethan's absence isn't from lack of love, but because he's building something important. Though I'm starting to wonder if he'll ever slow down enough to be part of this family. Family. The word struck Ethan like a physical blow. They had been starting a family, and he had been completely oblivious. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the study, Ethan read on. The diary chronicled Sophia's increasing isolation, her attempts to reach him growing more desperate as her pregnancy progressed. Another night alone. The company's European expansion consumes every moment of his attention. I've left notes, sent texts, even scheduled time on his calendar, all ignored or postponed. I'm beginning to think that even when I show him our child, he might be too busy to see what's right in front of him. The entries grew more heartbreaking as he continued, revealing a woman slowly accepting that she was facing parenthood alone, despite being married. I've made a decision. After trying for months, after being repeatedly silenced, interrupted, or postponed, I can't do this anymore. Our child deserves a parent who is present, who listens, who sees them. I've packed a bag. Tomorrow I'll try. One last time to make Ethan hear me. If he doesn't, I'll know it's time to go. Ethan's throat constricted as he turned to the final entry, dated the day before she left. Tonight was my final attempt. I stood before him, tears streaming down my face, begging him to just listen for 5 minutes. He told me he had a conference, call with Tokyo in 10 minutes, and whatever it was would have to wait. Again, it always has to wait. I cried all night, mourning the death of what we could have been, should have been, as a family. By morning, my decision was clear. I left my ring on his desk, where he's more likely to see it than if I'd left it on my finger. I hope one day you'll find this diary and have the patience to read it. Not for me, but for our child. Our child. The words blurred as unexpected tears filled Ethan's eyes. The narrative he'd constructed of Sophia's betrayal and abandonment shattered into dust. The truth was far more damning. She hadn't abandoned him. He had failed her, failed them both. And somewhere out there was a child. His. child who had grown up without him. We often hear only what we're prepared to listen to. The words that make it through our defenses are the ones that align with the story we've already decided is true. Think of a time when someone was trying to tell you something important, but you were too distracted to truly hear them. What signals did you miss? What conversations were you physically present for, but mentally absent from? What might change in your relationships if you practiced deep listening today? Not the kind where you're formulating your response while the other person is still speaking, but the kind where you're fully present, where you hear not just the words, but the emotion behind them, the need within them. The shock of revelation left Ethan frozen in the growing darkness of the study. Outside, streetlights had flickered on, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floor, light that failed to reach the hollowness expanding inside him. His child. He had a child he'd never met, never held, never even known about. Or rather, he corrected himself with crushing realization. A child he'd been too self-absorbed to notice was coming. How many times had Sophia tried to tell him? The diary documented dozens of attempts. Direct statements, notes, calendar appointments, sonogram images. It was as if he'd been not just blind, but willfully, stubbornly unseeing. With trembling hands, he flipped back through the diary, searching for any clue about where Sophia might have gone. What might have happened to their child? Boy or girl? Healthy? What was their name? The questions cascaded through his mind like an avalanche, burying him under the weight of 10 years of absence. 10 birthdays, 10 Christmases, first day of school, first lost tooth, nightmares he hadn't been there to soothe, triumphs he hadn't been there to celebrate. A decade of moments, irretrievable, vanished into the past like smoke. His fingers paused on an entry dated 7 months after Sophia had left. The handwriting different somehow, more rushed, the pressure of the pen heavier on the page. Liam, Brooks Carter was born today at 6:17 a.m. after 36 hours of labor. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of pure perfection. He has his father's eyes, those same intense blue eyes that I fell in love with. The nurses say he's unusually alert, taking everything in. Already his father's son, observing the world with such focus. I did it alone. My mother flew in from Arizona, but she couldn't make it in time for the delivery. I kept thinking Ethan should be here, would be here, if only he'd listened. I imagined him holding my hand through the contractions, coaching me through the pushing, cutting the cord. Instead, a kind nurse named Marianne stepped in, holding my hand and telling me I could do it when I thought I couldn't go on. When they placed Liam on my chest, all red and angry and perfect, I cried for everything, for the joy of him, for the pain of doing this alone, for Ethan missing this miracle. But mostly I cried because I finally understood what unconditional love feels like. I would walk through fire for this tiny person. I wonder if Ethan will ever know what he's missing. Liam. His son's name was Liam. A son who would now be, Ethan calculated quickly, 10 years old. A decade of birthdays, first steps, first words, first days of school, all lost to him forever. The sound that escaped him was primal, raw, a wounded animal's cry of loss and anguish. He pressed his fist against his mouth, shoulders heaving, with sobs that felt torn from someplace deep and untouched for years. The carefully constructed facade of Ethan Brooks, tech visionary and business titan, crumbled like ancient plaster, revealing the broken man beneath. He wept for what he'd lost, through his own blindness, a wife who had loved him enough to try again and again to reach him, a son he'd never known, a decade of moments that no power, no wealth, no achievement could ever reclaim. For hours he read and reread the diary's entries, piecing together the fragments of the life he should have shared. Sophia had moved to her grandmother's hometown, in Maine, Harborview, a small coastal community he vaguely remembered her mentioning. She'd found work as a librarian. Liam had been colicky as an infant, started walking at 10 months, loved dinosaurs and space. Liam said his first word today, moon. Not mama like most babies, but moon, pointing at the night sky with such excitement, already reaching for things beyond his grasp, just like his father. First day of preschool. Liam didn't cry when I dropped him off, just gave me a quick hug and marched right in, ready to conquer the world of finger painting and building blocks. So independent already. I was the one who cried, sitting in the car afterward, wishing I could share this milestone with someone who understood what it meant. Liam asked about his father today. I've been dreading this question. What do you tell a 4-year-old about a father who doesn't know he exists? I couldn't bear to tell him the whole truth, that his father was so wrapped up in his work that he didn't hear me when I tried to tell him about the pregnancy. Instead, I said his daddy was a very smart man who helped make computers that could think almost like people, that he loved creating things that could change the world. Liam's eyes lit up and he asked if he could make computers too someday. Of course, I told him. You can do anything. Later, I found him building a computer out of Legos and cardboard. For Daddy, he said, all these details of a life parallel to his own, a life he should have been part of, recorded faithfully by Sophia, perhaps in the hope that someday he would read them. By dawn, Ethan's grief had crystallized into purpose. The house could wait. The company could wait. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan Brooks would put something above business. He would find his son. As morning light spilled across the room, Ethan rose from the chair where he'd spent the night, muscles stiff, eyes raw from weeping. He moved to the window, watching the neighborhood come alive with morning routines. Parents shepherding children into cars for school drop-offs, joggers with steaming breath in the cool air, the ordinary rhythms of lives being lived while his had been suspended in amber. With hands that still trembled slightly, he reached for his phone and made a call. "Jenkins," he said when his assistant answered. The familiar efficiency in the man's voice, a strange comfort in the midst of his shattered reality. "I need the jet ready in 2 hours. And find me everything you can on Sophia Carter. Last known address, employment, everything." "Sir?" His assistant sounded confused by the urgency in his voice. "Is something wrong? You don't sound like yourself." "Everything's wrong," Ethan said quietly, then gathered himself. "And for the first time in 10 years, everything might have a chance to be right." "I don't understand, sir," Jenkins replied, the concern of a man who had witnessed a decade of his bosses driven on emotional efficiency now hearing something entirely unfamiliar. "You don't need to understand," Ethan said, not unkindly. "Just get me that information and prepare the jet. What about the Thompson merger? The board meeting is tomorrow." "It's scheduled for 10 a.m. The team has been preparing all week. They're expecting you to lead the final negotiations." Ethan looked down at the diary in his hands, at the life he'd been too blind to see, at the evidence of his monumental failure as a human being. The Thompson merger would add billions to breakthroughs. Valuation. Under normal circumstances, he'd have sacrificed sleep, food, anything to ensure its success. But these were no longer normal circumstances. "Cancel it. Cancel everything." "Everything, sir." "But the merger can wait," Ethan interrupted firmly. "Or it can proceed without me, I don't care." A stunned silence followed. In the 10 years Jenkins had worked for him, Ethan had never missed a major meeting, had never put anything above the company's interests. "For how long, sir?" Jenkins finally asked, his voice carefully neutral. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze moving to a photo on the bookshelf, him and Sophia on their wedding day, both smiling with the certainty of youth. Her face, so alive with joy and hope, burned itself into his consciousness anew. "As long as it takes." "And if anyone asks where you are?" Ethan considered this, understanding the corporate chaos his sudden disappearance would cause. The stock would dip, the board would panic, competitors would circle. None of it seemed to matter anymore. "Tell them I'm attending to a personal emergency," he said finally. "And Jenkins." "Yes, sir? Thank you for everything." He ended the call before his assistant could respond to the unprecedented gratitude. Then, with the diary carefully secured in his bag, Ethan Brooks walked out of the house that might have been a home, locking the door on what was to begin a journey to what might still be. Life-changing realizations often come when we least expect them. In a moment, everything we thought we knew can be turned upside down, revealing truths we were blind to, sometimes for years. Has there been a moment that completely shifted your perspective or priorities? A time when you suddenly saw what truly mattered? It might have been a crisis, a discovery, or simply words from someone who finally broke through your defenses. Harborview, Maine, was everything Boston wasn't. Quiet, unhurried. A place where neighbors still knew each other's names and businesses closed on Sundays. The kind of town where strangers were noticed, where time seemed to move more slowly, where the rhythms of the sea rather than the markets dictated the pace of life. Ethan felt conspicuous as he parked his rented car near the town square, his designer clothes and city bearing marking him as an outsider. Though he'd traded his usual bespoke suit for more casual attire, dark jeans and a simple cashmere sweater, there was no disguising the air of wealth and power that clung to him after years of corporate dominance. The local library, a charming brick building with white columns, stood across from the town green. His heart thundered in his chest. According to his research, Sophia had worked here for nearly a decade. The possibility that she might be just beyond those doors, that he might finally face the consequences of his negligence, made his palms sweat and his mouth go dry. For a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms and negotiating million-dollar deals, Ethan had never felt more vulnerable. Inside, the library was cool and quiet, smelling of old books and lemon polish. A young woman at the circulation desk looked up as he entered. "Can I help you find something?" she asked with the easy friendliness of small-town staff. "I'm looking for Sophia Carter," Ethan managed, his voice steadier than he felt. Something in the woman's expression changed, a subtle shift from openness to caution. "May I ask what this is regarding?" How did he even begin to explain? "I'm an old friend." The woman's polite smile remained fixed, but her eyes had grown wary. "Ms. Carter is out for lunch. She usually walks to the Harbor Cafe around this time." "Thank you," Ethan replied, relief and dread battling within him. The Harbor Cafe was easy to find, a weathered blue building with a deck overlooking the boats. Even before he entered, he saw her through the window. Sophia. 10 years had been kind to her. Her dark hair was shorter now, falling just below her shoulders instead of the waist-length style she'd worn during their marriage. A few strands of silver caught the sunlight where they framed her face, adding character rather than age. She wore a simple blue cardigan over a white blouse, casual but elegant in the effortless way she'd always had. She was reading as she ate, her lunch completely absorbed, just as she had been countless times at their kitchen table in another life. A half-eaten sandwich sat on her plate, a mug of something steaming beside it. Her reading glasses, a new addition since their time together, perched on the end of her nose. Ethan stood frozen, watching her turn a page, tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Familiar gestures from a woman who now seemed like a stranger. Yet in some ways, she hadn't changed at all. The slight furrow of concentration between her brows, the way she absently bit her lower lip when deeply engrossed in text, the elegant curve of her neck as she bent over her book, all exactly as he remembered. What had he expected? That grief or single motherhood would have ravaged her. Instead, she looked peaceful, settled in her skin in a way she never quite had in Boston, as if the past decade had refined rather than diminished her. His chest tightened. What right did he have to disrupt the life she'd built? To reopen wounds that had likely taken years to heal? Perhaps he should leave now before being seen, before causing fresh pain. But then he thought of Liam, his son, somewhere in this town, perhaps in school at this very moment. A boy with his eyes who had never known his father, a boy he had a responsibility to, regardless of how uncomfortable or painful the conversation ahead might be. Before he could gather his courage to approach, the cafe door opened, and a young boy burst in, making a beeline for Sophia's table. "Mom, Mrs. Abernathy let us out early because the science kits arrived." Ethan's world narrowed to a pinpoint, all sound muffled as he stared at the child, at Liam, his son. The boy was tall for 10, with a mess of dark hair that must have come from Sophia, but even from a distance, Ethan could see his own eyes looking out from that young face, bright with excitement. It was like looking at a photo of himself at that age, the same jaw beginning to lose its childish roundness, the same slight angle to the eyebrows, the same hands gesturing animatedly as he spoke. But there was Sophia in him too, her smile, her expressive way of speaking, her vibrancy. Sophia laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "That's great, sweetheart. Did you thank her?" "Course I did," Liam replied, sliding into the chair opposite her. "Can we go to the library after? I want to get that book on black holes." "As soon as I finish my shift," Sophia promised. Then, as if sensing a presence, she looked up, directly at Ethan. The color drained from her face, her hand instinctively moving to Liam's shoulder in a protective gesture. Her coffee mug froze halfway to her lips, then slowly lowered back to the table with a soft clink that seemed to echo in the sudden silence between them. Recognition, shock, fear, anger. The emotions played across her features in rapid succession, like seasons changing in time-lapse photography. For an instant, Ethan saw the young woman he'd married, vulnerable, open, before her expression hardened into something more guarded, a protective shell built over years of solitary parenting. Ethan took a step forward, then another, his legs moving of their own accord until he stood at their table. The boy, Liam, his son, looked up at him curiously, without recognition. Of course, there was no recognition. How could there be? Liam had never seen his father before this moment. "Sophia," Ethan said, her name like a prayer on his lips, reverent and pleading all at once. She'd recovered her composure, her face settling into carefully neutral lines, though her eyes remained wide and alert. A deer sensing danger, calculating routes of escape. "Ethan," she replied, her voice soft but firm, betraying only the slightest tremor. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I found the diary," he said simply, the words hanging between them like a confession. 3 small words that contained worlds of meaning, a decade of misunderstanding, a lifetime of absence. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by something complex, a mixture of vindication and old pain. Her chin lifted slightly, a subtle gesture of defiance he remembered well from their arguments, rare as they had been before the end. "Liam," she said, not taking her eyes off Ethan, "could you please go ask Ms. Jenkins for another glass of water?" The boy looked between them, obviously sensing the tension crackling in the air like static electricity. His intelligent gaze, so like Ethan's own, moved from his mother's face to this stranger standing at their table, piecing together that something significant was happening even if he didn't understand what. "Sure, Mom," he said, sliding off his chair, still watching Ethan with undisguised curiosity as he backed away. Once Liam was out of earshot, Sophia spoke, her voice tight as a bowstring. "You have no right to show up here after all this time. No right at all. Facing our past mistakes takes incredible courage. It means standing before the truth, unshielded and vulnerable, acknowledging the pain we've caused, perhaps unintentionally, but caused nonetheless. When was the last time you had to confront a difficult truth about yourself or your actions? Did you run from it or face it head-on? What emotions surfaced in that moment of reckoning? The hardest conversations are often the most necessary ones. They're the bridges we must cross to reach understanding, forgiveness, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to begin again. "He's incredible," Ethan said softly, his eyes never leaving the boy, his son, as Liam launched another stone across the harbor's surface. The flat rock skipped 5 times before sinking, each bounce creating expanding rings on the water's glassy surface. "He is," Sophia agreed, her voice warming with maternal pride despite the tension that still lingered between them. "He's brilliant at math and science just like you. Top of his class, but he's got a gentleness that's all his own. A sensitivity that surprises me sometimes." The initial shock of their cafe encounter had given way to a tentative truce. After Sophia's revelation, Liam had stared at Ethan in silent disbelief for a full minute, then fired off a barrage of questions that neither adult was fully prepared to answer. Why hadn't he been around? Where did he live? Why was he here now? Did he know Liam existed? The rapid-fire interrogation of a child whose world had just shifted on its axis. Sophia had suggested they take a walk, buying time for all of them to process. Now, as Liam explored the shoreline ahead of them, they sat in uneasy proximity on a weathered bench overlooking the harbor. How did he take it? Ethan asked, glancing at her profile. When you first told him about me, I mean. Sophia watched her son bend to select another stone, testing its weight in his palm with the seriousness of a scientist conducting an experiment. He was maybe 4 when he first really asked, she said after a moment. We were at the playground, and another boy's father was pushing him on the swings. Liam watched them for a while, then looked at me and asked where his daddy was. She swallowed, the memory still painful. I told him his daddy lived far away, that he couldn't be with us, but that he would be proud of what a big boy Liam was becoming. Ethan felt his chest constrict imagining the scene, a little boy watching other fathers and children becoming aware of his own missing piece. Why didn't you fight harder to make me listen? Ethan asked, the question that had been burning in him since reading the diary. Why didn't you tell me directly about the pregnancy before leaving? Sophia's gaze remained on Liam as she answered, a protective instinct to keep her eyes on her child even in this safe harbor. I did tell you, Ethan. Multiple times, in multiple ways. You were just incapable of hearing it. She turned to face him then, years of unspoken hurt in her eyes. The night before I left, I stood in front of you and said, Ethan, I'm going to have a baby. Your baby. I need you to be part of this. Do you remember what you said? Shame washed over him as the memory surfaced. Sophia tearful in the doorway of his home office, him barely looking up from his computer, the Tokyo investors waiting on the conference call. I said I had a call with Tokyo and to leave a note on my desk, he whispered, the full weight of his dismissal hitting him anew. The memory, once fuzzy, was now sharp enough to cut, her expression as she realized finally that she would never be heard. That what grew inside her, their miracle, their child, would never compete with the empire he was building. That's right. So I did. I left my ring on your desk with divorce papers. That was my note. The silence that followed was heavy with regret. I'm not proud of how I handled it, Sophia continued after a moment, a gull crying overhead as if punctuating her confession. Walking away wasn't just about you. It was about protecting myself, protecting what little self-worth I had left. Every dismissed conversation, every ignored attempt to connect, it was like becoming invisible in my own marriage. And I couldn't bear the thought of our child feeling that same invisibility. Ethan nodded, understanding in a way he never could have 10 years ago. You did what you had to do. I did, she agreed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear in that familiar gesture that made his heart ache with recognition. But that doesn't mean it was easy, or that I didn't question it 1,000 times, especially on Liam's birthday each year, when he asked about you, when he accomplished something and looked around for the father who should have been there to see it. Her words cut deeper than any angry accusation could have. Anger he could have defended against could have matched with his own 10 years of resentment. But this quiet accounting of absence, of moments lost forever, left him defenseless. I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, Ethan said, watching as Liam crouched to examine something in the sand. A shell, perhaps, or an interesting stone. Every movement, every expression of his son was a miracle he was only now discovering, a book whose first 10 chapters he'd missed entirely. No, you don't, Sophia replied, but without malice. There was a weariness to her tone, the exhaustion of a wound too long carried. And I'm not sure I'm ready to give it. 10 years of single motherhood, Ethan. 10 years of doing everything alone. From midnight feedings to parent-teacher conferences to explaining to a little boy why his father wasn't there for his birthday. 10 years of working 2 jobs sometimes to make ends meet. Of never having someone to share the burden when I was exhausted. of being both mother and father when I barely knew how to be one of those things. Ethan winced at each item in the catalog, of his absence, each reminder of all he had missed, all he had failed to be. I want to make it right, Sophia, or as right as it can be after all this time. She looked at him skeptically, the afternoon light catching the fine lines around her eyes, evidence of a decade's worth of worry, laughter, struggle, and triumph that he had not witnessed. How? You can't buy back those years, Ethan. Your money can't fix this. I know that, he said, a flare of defensiveness rising before he tamped it down, reminding himself that her skepticism was well earned. I'm not trying to throw money at the problem. I want a chance to know him, to be part of his life going forward if you'll allow it. Sophia watched as Liam carefully placed stones in a pattern on the sand, his small face intent with concentration. There was love in her gaze, but also fierce protection, the look of a mother who had defended her child against the world alone for too long, to easily trust anyone else with his well-being, even his biological father. It's not just up to me, she said, nodding toward Liam. He's old enough to have a say in this. I won't force him to accept you, just as I won't prevent him from knowing you if that's what he wants. As if sensing their attention, Liam looked back over his shoulder at them, his expression a mixture of curiosity and wariness. After a moment's hesitation, he gathered something from his stone arrangement and walked back toward the bench. Mom says you live in Boston, he said to Ethan, his voice careful, testing. He held a perfectly flat stone in his palm, turning it over and examining its surface as if it were a rare specimen. I do, Ethan confirmed, feeling strangely nervous under his son's direct gaze. Those eyes, his eyes, assessing him with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. I have a technology company there. Breakthrough Tech, right? Liam asked, a spark of interest in his eyes. We use your educational software at school. Mrs. Abernathy says it's revolutionary. Pride and irony mingled in Ethan's chest. His son had been using his company's products without either of them knowing their connection. The coding he'd done late into the night, the algorithms he'd obsessed over, had somehow found their way to his son despite his absence. A connection, albeit an indirect one, had existed between them all along. That's right, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. We developed that program to help kids learn complex concepts through interactive simulations. The adaptive learning system adjusts to each student's pace and learning style. The quantum physics module is awesome, Liam said, a hint of enthusiasm breaking through his guard. I completed all the levels. The visual representation of wave-particle duality really helped me understand it better than the textbook explanation. You're interested in quantum physics? Ethan asked, genuine surprise and delight in his voice. The boy was 10. Most kids, his age, were into dinosaurs or space at best, not the fundamental mysteries of particle behavior. He reads college textbooks for fun, Sophia interjected, with an affectionate eye roll, some of her earlier tension easing as she watched her son's hesitant animation. Last summer, he built a cloud chamber in our garage to track cosmic rays. The neighbors thought we were conducting some kind of weird experiment. You built a cloud chamber? Ethan couldn't hide his astonishment. I did the same thing when I was about your age. My science teacher thought I was crazy until it actually worked. For the first time, a small smile tugged at Liam's lips, a tentative mirror of Ethan's own expression. Everyone at the science fair was pretty amazed. I won first place. Of course you did, Ethan said softly, a father's pride washing over him, foreign, but instinctive, as natural as breathing. The moment of connection hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Liam's expression clouded again. Why didn't you want to know me before? He asked bluntly, the hurt of a decade compressed into a single question. Ethan felt Sophia tense beside him, but she remained silent, allowing him to answer. I made the biggest mistake of my life, Ethan said, meeting his son's gaze directly. I was so focused on building my company that I didn't listen when your mother tried to tell me about you. I didn't know you existed until yesterday when I found her diary. But that doesn't excuse what I did. I should have been there from the beginning. Liam considered this, his young face solemn with a contemplation beyond his years. So you didn't know about me? You weren't staying away on purpose? No, Ethan said firmly. If I had known about you, nothing could have kept me away. Nothing. The boy seemed to be processing this, weighing the truth of Ethan's words against the reality of his decade-long absence. Do you want to know me now? Liam finally asked. More than anything in the world, Ethan answered without hesitation. Liam nodded. Not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I have homework to finish, he said, looking to Sophia. Can we go home now? Of course, sweetheart, Sophia replied, standing. She turned to Ethan, her expression guarded, but no longer hostile. We live on Maple Street, the blue house with the white porch swing. It was as much invitation as Ethan could hope for, a door left slightly ajar. Thank you, he said, knowing the words were inadequate for the gift she was considering. As they walked away, Liam glanced back once, his eyes, Ethan's eyes, full of questions that would take time to answer. Ethan remained on the bench long after they disappeared from view, watching the same waters where his son had skipped stones, contemplating the ripples of his past choices and the unfamiliar path that lay ahead. Sometimes the hardest conversations are the ones we need most. Is there someone in your life waiting for you to truly hear them? Or perhaps someone you need to have a difficult conversation with? Remember, acknowledging the need for these conversations is the first step toward healing. I don't care how the board reacts, Jenkins. I'm extending my leave indefinitely. Ethan paced the modest confines of his hotel room, the corporate crisis on the other end of the line seeming increasingly trivial compared to the personal one he was navigating. Sir, the merger can't proceed without your approval, and the shareholders are getting nervous, his CFO explained, tension evident in his voice. Your sudden absence has already triggered a 4-point drop in our stock. 6 days ago, such news would have sent Ethan into crisis mode. Now he looked out the window toward the direction of Maple Street, thinking of the blue house with the white porch swing where his son was presumably doing homework. Then let it drop, he said with newfound clarity. The company will recover. This won't. After ending the call, Ethan sat heavily on the edge of the bed. For the first time in his adult life, his priorities had fundamentally shifted. The empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, none of it filled the hollow space that had opened inside him when he'd seen Liam's face. Ethan stood on the sidewalk, uncertainty gripping him. He'd deliberately dressed down today, jeans and a simple button-down rather than his usual tailored suit. The last thing he wanted was to intimidate Liam or make him feel that Ethan was trying to buy his affection. Before he could second-guess himself, the front door opened, and Liam emerged, backpack slung over one shoulder. He stopped short when he spotted Ethan. Hi, Ethan said, suddenly feeling like the 10-year-old himself. I thought maybe I could walk you to school, if that's okay. Liam glanced back toward the house where Sophia now stood in the doorway. She gave a small nod. I guess, Liam said with the cautious neutrality of a child who'd learned to protect himself from disappointment. They walked in awkward silence for the first block, Ethan struggling to find words that wouldn't sound contrived. Mom says you invented the neural interface that helps paralyzed people use computers with their thoughts, Liam finally said, breaking the tension. I was part of the team that developed it, Ethan corrected, surprised by Liam's knowledge. It was actually inspired by my grandfather. He had ALS, a disease that affects nerve cells. I know what ALS is, Liam said. We did a charity walk for it last year at school. Of course he knew. This boy, this brilliant child who read college textbooks and built cloud chambers, was far more advanced than Ethan had been at his age. That's great, Ethan said, genuine admiration in his voice. Your mom has done an amazing job raising you. Liam nodded, kicking at a stone on the sidewalk. She works really hard. Sometimes she takes extra shifts at the library so I can go to science camp in the summer. The simple statement illuminated the financial realities Sophia had faced as a single, Mother realities Ethan had never had to consider, insulated by his wealth. "You like science camp?" he asked. "It's the best," Liam said, a flash of enthusiasm breaking through his guard. "Last year we built robots that could navigate obstacle courses. Mine won because I programmed it to learn from its mistakes instead of just following a set path." Pride swelled in Ethan's chest. That's incredible, Liam. Adaptive learning algorithms are complex even for adult programmers." Liam shrugged, but Ethan could see he was pleased by the recognition. "It wasn't that hard once I figured out the logic." They turned a corner and the school came into view. A red brick building with American and Maine flags fluttering out front. "This is me," Liam said, stopping at the edge of the schoolyard where other children were gathering. "Thanks for letting me walk with you," Ethan said, fighting the urge to hug the boy. "Would it be okay if I picked you up after school? Maybe we could go for ice cream or something?" Liam studied him, those familiar blue eyes assessing, calculating. "I get out at 3, he said finally. "But don't come if you're going to be busy with work stuff. Mom always says it's better to say no than to promise and not show up." The statement hit Ethan like a physical blow, a child's wisdom born from disappointment. "I promise I'll be here," Ethan said with fierce conviction. "Nothing is more important." Liam nodded, not quite believing but perhaps wanting to. "Okay. See you at 3 then." He turned and jogged toward a group of boys near the entrance. "See you at 3, Ethan echoed, though Liam was already out of earshot. The town library was quiet at this hour, only a few elderly patrons browsing the shelves. Sophia looked up from the circulation desk as Ethan approached, her expression guarded. "How did it go this morning?" she asked. "Good, I think," Ethan replied. "I'm picking him up from school later, if that's okay with you," he added quickly. Sophia considered him for a moment. "He mentioned you might. I told him it was his decision." "Thank you for that," Ethan said sincerely. "I know you have every right to keep me at arm's length." She sighed, setting aside the book she'd been processing. "I'm not doing it for you, Ethan. I'm doing it for Liam. He deserves to know his father, even if that father was 10 years late showing up." The pointed remark stung, but Ethan accepted it as his due. "I understand. And I want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt your lives or to try to buy my way into Liam's affections. I just want a chance to know him." "And then what?" Sophia asked, the question that had clearly been weighing on her. "You go back to Boston in a week? Call on birthdays and Christmas? Fly him out for the occasional weekend when you're not too busy with the company?" The challenge in her voice was justified. 10 years of single parenthood had earned her the right to be skeptical. "I'm staying," Ethan said simply. "I've taken an indefinite leave from the company. I've booked the hotel room for a month to start, but I'm looking at rental properties in town." Surprise flickered across Sophia's features. "You'd leave Breakthrough? Just like that?" "The company can run without me for a while," Ethan said. "And if it can't, then I've failed as a CEO. Besides, most of what I do can be handled remotely when necessary." Sophia shook her head, a hint of the old familiarity in her expression. "The Ethan I knew would never have said that." "The Ethan you knew was a fool," he replied quietly. "A fool who didn't understand what really mattered until it was almost too late." Their eyes held for a long moment, years of shared history and separate paths converging in a look. "Don't hurt him, Ethan," Sophia finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's wanted to know you his whole life. Don't show up, now only to disappear when things get complicated, or when the next big deal comes along." "I won't," Ethan promised. "I swear to you, Sophia, I'm here for as long as he'll have me, for as long as you'll both have me." The admission hung between them, an offering and a question wrapped in a vow. Before Sophia could respond, the library door opened and patrons entered, breaking the moment. 3 o'clock, she said, returning to her professional demeanor. "Don't be late." "I won't be," Ethan assured her, backing away from the desk. "Not ever again." Actions speak louder than words, especially when rebuilding trust. Have you ever had to prove yourself through consistent actions rather than promises? Or perhaps you've been on Sophia's side, cautiously allowing someone back into your life. Ethan adjusted the telescope by the window, checking the alignment one final time. The night was clear, stars sharp against the black Maine sky, perfect for viewing the meteor shower predicted for tonight. His phone buzzed with a message from ISCO, board meeting adjourned. Thompson contract approved. Full details in your email. A month ago, missing such a crucial board meeting would have been unthinkable. Now Ethan sent a quick acknowledgement and returned his attention to the telescope. The company was adapting to his remote work arrangement better than expected, and he was discovering that many of the emergencies that had consumed his attention weren't emergencies at all. A knock at the door sent a surge of anticipation through him. Liam stood on the threshold, overnight bag in hand, Sophia a few steps behind him. Right on time, Ethan said with a smile. The meteor shower should be starting in about an hour. The past weeks had seen a gradual thawing between father and son. Afternoon ice cream outings expanding to longer excursions, conversations growing less guarded, shared interests in science and technology forming bridges across the decade-long chasm. This would be the first overnight stay, a milestone that felt momentous to Ethan, though he tried not to show it. I brought my astronomy journal, Liam said, some of his earlier reticence replaced by tentative excitement. And Mom packed hot chocolate. Perfect, Ethan replied. He looked to Sophia, who lingered in the hallway. Would you like to join us? There's plenty of room. She shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. This is your time. Besides, I have a rare night off. There's a book calling my name. She knelt to Liam's level. You have fun with your dad, okay? Call me if you need anything. Dad. The word still sent a shock of emotion through Ethan each time he heard it. Liam had only recently begun using it, testing the title as carefully as he tested their relationship. I will, Liam promised, giving her a quick hug. I'll have him back by noon tomorrow, Ethan said. Sophia nodded, her eyes communicating what words didn't. Trust extended, fragile but growing. After she left, Ethan showed Liam around the modest, two-bedroom apartment. It was nothing like his Boston penthouse, but he found he didn't miss the luxury. He'd furnished the second bedroom specifically with Liam in mind. Space posters on the walls, books on astronomy and physics on the shelves, a desk for homework or projects. This is for me? Liam asked, taking in the room with wide eyes. Whenever. You want to stay over? Ethan confirmed. I thought we could set up a small lab in the corner there for experiments. Liam ran his hand over the desk, something like wonder in his expression. Mom said you used to have a mansion in Boston. I still do, Ethan said. But this feels more like home now. It was true, he realized with surprise. The sparse apartment in this coastal town had become more of a home in a few weeks than his luxury penthouse had been in years. Come on, he said, seeing Liam's gaze drift to the telescope by the window. Let's get set up for the meteor shower. I've got the coordinates, for the best viewing already programmed in. As they adjusted the telescope together, Ethan marveled at how naturally Liam took to the equipment, his small hands confident on the dials and lenses. Mom says you missed my science fair last week because of work, Liam said suddenly, his voice carefully neutral. Ethan's heart sank. He'd had an unavoidable video conference with European investors that had run long, the first time he'd broken a promise to Liam since entering his life. I did, he admitted, turning to face his son directly. And I'm sorry, Liam. I should have rescheduled the meeting. Liam shrugged, but Ethan could see the hurt beneath the casual gesture. It's okay. I'm used to doing those things without a dad. It's not okay, Ethan said firmly, and you shouldn't have to be used to that. He knelt to Liam's level, ensuring their eyes met. I made a mistake. The old me would have said the meeting was too important to miss, but the truth is, nothing was more important than seeing your project. I'm still learning how to be a good father, and I'm going to make mistakes. But I promise you this. I will always try to do better. Liam studied him, those eerily familiar blue eyes searching for truth. Mom always came to everything, even when she was really tired from work. Your mom is amazing, Ethan agreed. She's been both parents to you for 10 years and she's done an incredible job. I have a lot of catching up to do. After a moment, Liam nodded, accepting the apology with the straightforward grace of childhood. I got first place again, he offered, for my quantum entanglement demonstration. Of course you did, Ethan said, pride swelling in his chest. Tell me all about it? As Liam launched into an explanation that would challenge many physics professors, Ethan listened with the full attention he'd failed to give Sophia all those years ago, the attention he was now learning to give to what truly mattered. Wow, did you see that one? Liam exclaimed, pointing to a particularly bright streak across the sky. They sat on folding chairs on the small balcony, hot chocolate in hand, necks craned upward. The night had grown chilly, and Ethan had wrapped Liam in a spare blanket. The boy's enthusiasm for each meteor was infectious, his scientific observations mingling with pure childlike wonder. That one was at least a -6 magnitude, Liam said, making a note in his journal. Probably from the outer edge of the debris field. Ethan smiled, warmed by more than the hot chocolate. This brilliant, passionate boy was his son. A miracle he was only now beginning to fully appreciate. Between meteors, their conversation had wandered from astronomy to school, to Liam's friends, to stories of Ethan's own childhood experiments, many of which had ended in minor disasters that made Liam laugh. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the sky, the awkwardness of their early encounters increasingly rare. "Dad?" Liam said finally, the word still new on his tongue. "Yes? Are you going to leave again? Go back to Boston?" The question pierced Ethan's heart with its vulnerability, the fear behind it palpable. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not leaving, Liam. Boston is just where my company is based. But home is here now, where you and your mom are." Liam nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer. Then, after a moment, "Mom still loves you, you know." Ethan nearly choked on his hot chocolate, caught off guard by the perceptiveness of his son. "What makes you say that?" Liam shrugged. "She keeps the picture of your wedding in her drawer, and sometimes when you leave after dropping me off, she watches from the window. Not in a creepy way," he added hastily. "Just like she's thinking about stuff." Ethan absorbed this, unsure how to respond. His own feelings for Sophia had resurfaced with unexpected intensity over the past weeks. Not just the young love they'd shared, but something deeper, born of seeing her strength as a mother, her grace in allowing him into their lives despite every justification to shut him out. "Your mom is an incredible woman," he said carefully, "and I hurt her very badly by not listening when it mattered most. Some things can't be fixed easily, Liam, even when people still care about each other. But some things can be fixed, right?" Liam persisted. "You're always saying that every problem has a solution if you're patient enough to find it." Ethan smiled at having his own words quoted back to him. "That's true, but people aren't problems to be solved. Relationships take time, and work and trust." Liam considered this with the seriousness he brought to all new information. "Well, I think you should try. Mom's happier since you came back. She laughs more." Before Ethan could respond, a brilliant meteor streaked across the sky, leaving a glowing trail that lingered for several seconds. "Whoa," Liam breathed, momentarily distracted from the conversation. "That was the best one yet." As his son scribbled excitedly in his journal, Ethan's thoughts remained on Sophia, on second chances, on patience, on the possibility of healing what once seemed irreparably broken. "Dad?" Liam said again, looking up from his journal. "Can we do this again next month for the Persids? They're supposed to be even better." "Absolutely," Ethan promised. "It's a date." Liam smiled, a full, unguarded smile that transformed his face, and leaned slightly against Ethan's shoulder as they turned their attention back to the sky, watching for falling stars together. Some of life's most profound moments happen in quiet conversations under the stars. Have you ever had a heart-to-heart that changed your perspective or deepened a relationship? Perhaps with a child, a parent, or someone you're rebuilding trust with? I'd love to hear about that special conversation in the comments. What made it meaningful and how did it change things afterward? Rain pelted the sidewalks of Harborview, turning the quaint streets slick and gray. Ethan stood under the awning of the bookstore across from Liam's school, umbrella in hand, watching as children began to stream out of the building. His phone buzzed with an email, another acquisition offer for Breakthrough, the third this month. The company had not only survived his extended absence but had thrived under the leadership team he'd assembled, proving what he should have known years ago. No one was irreplaceable, not even him. He'd find time to review the offer later. Now his focus was elsewhere. The school doors opened again and Liam emerged with a group of friends laughing at something one of them had said. Seeing him like this, carefree, ordinary, belonging, filled Ethan with quiet joy. Over the past months, he'd become a fixture in the boy's life, present for homework and science projects, baseball games, and parent-teacher conferences. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been missteps and misunderstandings, moments when Ethan's corporate instincts clashed with the needs of fatherhood. But each day had brought them closer, each shared experience building the foundation of a relationship that should have begun a decade earlier. Spotting Ethan, Liam waved goodbye to his friends and jogged through the rain towards the bookstore. "You're early," Liam observed as he reached the awning. "Meeting finished sooner than expected," Ethan replied. It was a small thing but significant, prioritizing his son over work, ensuring he was not just on time but early. As they prepared to dash through the rain to Ethan's car, something caught Liam's attention. His expression changed, eyes widening. "Dad, look," he said, pointing across the street. Sophia stood there, apparently having come to pick Liam up herself, forgetting it was Ethan's day. She had no umbrella, and the rain had soaked through her light jacket. But it was her expression that held Ethan's attention, a mixture of surprise and something softer, more vulnerable as she watched them together. "She's getting soaked," Liam said with the practical concern of a child for a parent. Without thinking, Ethan stepped into the rain, crossing the street with long strides, umbrella extended. He stopped before Sophia, sheltering her from the downpour. "You forgot it was my day," he said gently, no accusation in his voice. "Parent-teacher conferences got rescheduled," she explained, pushing wet hair from her face. "I wasn't thinking clearly." For a moment they stood in silence, the umbrella creating a small haven in the storm, forcing them closer than they'd been in years. Ethan could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the small lines that parenthood and time had etched around them, beautiful in their testimony to her strength and care. "He called you Dad," Sophia said quietly. "It's becoming natural for him." "I know," Ethan replied, emotion thick in his voice. "I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful every time." "You've earned it these past months," she admitted. "You've been consistent, present, everything you weren't before." Ooh. The acknowledgement meant more coming from her than from anyone else, the person who had most reason to doubt him, to expect him to fail again. "I'm trying to become the man I should have been 10 years ago," Ethan said. "The man you deserved then. The father Liam deserves now." Rain pattered against the umbrella, creating a rhythm that seemed to measure the silence between them. In the distance, thunder rolled. "We should get out of this weather," Sophia finally said. "Both of you come to the house, I'll make hot chocolate." The invitation, so simple yet weighted with meaning, hung between them. "We'd like that," Ethan responded. As they turned to call Liam from the bookstore awning, they saw him already crossing. The street hood pulled up against the rain. He reached them, slightly breathless. "Are we all going home together?" he asked, poorly concealed hope in his voice. Home. Such a simple word, yet so complex in meaning. A place, a feeling, a constellation of relationships that had been broken and were slowly, tentatively being rebuilt. "Yes," Sophia said, meeting Ethan's gaze over their son's head. "We're all going home." Ethan extended the umbrella to cover all three of them, his arm brushing Sophia's shoulders, a touch that seemed to bridge past and present, hurt and healing, They walked through the rain-washed streets toward the blue house with the white porch swing. Liam between them, Ethan thought of the diary that had led him here, the words unread for a decade, the truth that had waited patiently to be discovered. It wasn't too late after all, not for any of them. Life rarely gives us perfect endings, but sometimes it offers perfect new beginnings. If this story touched you, let me know which part resonated most with your own experience. Have you ever discovered that it wasn't too late to mend what was broken or to become who you might have been? Remember, in our most painful experiences often lie our greatest opportunities for growth. It's never too late to listen to what's been left unsaid, to repair what's been damaged, or to become the person you were meant to be. If you found value in this story, take a moment to reflect on who in your life might need to hear these words today. Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply to be present, to listen, and to show up, even when it's raining.